We've talked about ethics in AI. We've talked about democracy in AI. We've talked about trying to regulate AI. I get this feeling that we're trying to throw our arms around AI as lawyers and as citizens and stop a quickly moving vehicle, right? How, and I'd like to ask each of you this question, from your perspective, what can we do, how can we, as lawyers, change or limit AI or change the way lawyers interface with AI? What can we do to stop this feeling of out of control that's coming with the quick movement of technology?
I can respond quick.
Please, just go down the line.
More information, conversations, education, talking about it. I'll say that a main reason that I signed up to participate here today was to learn about it. That I felt I don't know that much about it and wanted to learn more.
Are you now horrified?
I'm not horrified. I'm not horrified. Even you're very, like, the simple way you described how one word and then it chooses the next word, to me, like, I didn't know how that worked. That was incredibly informative.
And it's kind of reassuring to know that it's a dumb technology, right?
Yeah. I mean, and then we look at the deep fakes and we can see that piece. But I think as the legal community can be part of educating ourselves and clients and the public about how it interfaces with the law, with lawyers, that will help, because that's also what I think about how we address some of the issues that Dean Gardina raised with deepfakes, legislating them, First Amendment issues. I too am kind of a free speech purist, and people are seeing photographs and thinking it's real, and it's just like a photograph of like a beautiful house on a hill somewhere. But anyone who's ever taken a photograph, you see it and you know it's fake. You know the photographs are not that crisp and clear. And so trying to talk with the public and saying, we can figure this out.
Even Kate is faking photos.
Oh,
Princess, setting that aside.
Yeah. But so we can, but there's a way to get at that. And I think, again, that's transparency and more marketplace of ideas, more speech, more talking about the various pieces of it will help assuage the fear.
It means we're going to go slow, right?
I don't know that. Who's we going to go slow? The technology is going fast. It's going.
No, but to moderate the impacts of AI on our culture.
Yeah. Although I'd say, and I think this argument's happening and being made, that existing laws, existing regulations can be applied. And that's where skilled attorneys, the human brain, can get in there and make those connections and do that analysis and say, wait, there's this law, there's this case, there's this precedent, and the facts really line up here.
Stephanie, what do you think?
I agree. I was going to say education. Like, I've dedicated my entire career to technology and learning and like bringing that together. And it's been really neat to see, because we always make assumptions about things, right? If we don't know the thing, we're like, oh, that's scary or that's whatever. But if you actually learn about it, then you're like, oh, that's not so scary. That's not, I can do this. And usually bridging that, and I love technology, but I think education and technology like is my jam. So it's like that I think would solve a lot. And it would go slow because training and teaching is slow, learning is slow, but I think that's part of it too.
That's kind of what we learned today is people are slower than computers, but guess
That's
what?
okay.
That might be okay.
Yeah.
Dean Gardina?
Let's have the students talk first.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Melinda.
What comes to mind for me is just kind of all of us who are not Gen Z. So I am a millennial, although I am an elder. I am an elder of the millennial tribe. And we have to become comfortable with going to the people who know how to use this the best. That may not be us. It may not be people that we work with. It may not be things that we're comfortable with. But it's just a matter of kind of putting that ego aside and being like, hey, I really don't even know what all of this means. Can someone please explain it to me? And that might have to happen daily, in all of these things, or attending trainings, attending seminars on how to go about using this. I think that, for me, even personally, once you kind of get in a zone and you get a routine and you do what you do and you know what you know, the idea of like kind of opening up this Pandora's box of this whole new way of interfacing with the world, it can be pretty scary. And it's enough to just be like, hey, I'm not even going to touch that. I don't know. I know how I do things. It's worked fine for me so far, but you kind of have to get into it to understand it. You have to be willing to become part of the world to operate effectively in it. I do this with my 12-year-old daughter. I don't understand this middle school lingo of Sigma skibbity toilet. What all of these kids are saying, like, I don't get it. So I go on TikTok and I look at the videos that they're watching. Like, I try to at least become familiar, because that's the only way I'm going to understand really what these kids are talking about when I'm listening to them. Like, you got to keep finger on them.
So,
but
Urban Dictionary.
even so, like, they're referencing specific TikToks in certain ways, and you have to get into it. You have to be in the environment where everything is happening. And sometimes that requires you to kind of put that ego and kind of your own experiences aside and being like, hey, I'm going to jump into this new world.
Carlos,
Oh, just building off
can
of
you
that.
beat the skibbity toilet?
I don't even know.
Well, just building off of what everyone has said, I believe just getting specialized tools for like AI, just going to ChatGPT might not be the best solution for lawyers. We might need a specialized law AI, as we saw our keynote speaker present, which I think is very analogous to a lawyer going into Google to find an answer versus Westlaw or LexisNexis. I would argue that someone that's using Google for the answers as a lawyer in a specialized field isn't doing their fiduciary duty to the client, because there's other sources of information that are more vetted, more reliable than just the open internet. So having specialized AI for law might be the way forward.
Sometimes you can get ideas by just
Yes, Google's a good starting point, but you should not do all your research on Google.
No, I don't know that I have anything more profound to add. I would say there is a role for bar associations to play when we talk about the legal profession and a responsibility that we have as a profession around this. And I think there is a place for the courts to play. You say, it's difficult to go slow. I think the courts can slow things down when it comes to what's presented to them and how it's presented. So there might be places where we do need to use professional regulations, professional ethics, court rules, et cetera, that does slow it down until all attorneys are able to truly engage with the tools responsibly and ethically and understand them.
I have a comment. I grew up in India. Being truthful and honest was like the way you're supposed to be. How come so many people are lying these days? On the internet, on TV. So maybe the churches or somebody should teach them, the new generation, some good values.
If I had the answer to that question, I wouldn't be sitting here.
And I want to be careful. It's not the new generation that is involved in a lot of the disinformation and misleading.
Teach the new generation good values.
Somebody earlier used the phrase snake oil to refer to what was going on. And it occurred to me when that word was used how old it is and what it meant, right? So the origins of that word were con artists in the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance that were selling snake oil, right? So this has been around and a problem in different ways for a long time.
Human beings.
A long time. It's just part of this fast, slow thing, right, that's going on here. It was slow. The snake oil got to 3 villagers, right?
Yeah.
It didn't get to the world instantly. And so some of what you talked about earlier with how quickly these things move, that's part of our issue. It's moving so fast, this information. How do you slow the fire hose in these situations? And it is a fire hose. And we're all drinking out of a fire hose instead of one guy standing by a wagon selling so-and-so's tonic, you know? It's different.
And perceptions of reality now have really changed in that teenagers now don't trust a picture or a video because they figure it's been altered. You can be made to be looking thinner, you can change your hair color, everything can be different. Where it used to be in court, if you had a photo of something, that was a really big deal. That was evidence. That was proof right there. And now with teenagers and young adults now, and the generations that will come after them, none of them will believe a photo or a video.
And I would challenge you to think that Shakespeare taught us this very thing when he wrote about Othello, right? And we've had these lessons. Don't trust what you see. Don't, ask, dig deeper, think about it in a different way. These are age-old questions. It's just the speed at which we have to answer them. When I never looked at photos like this. My kids have been teaching me to look at photos. My kids are in college and my spouse does art. So he would have looked at the picture of Donald Trump and he would have said, yeah, nobody has a thigh that short, so that picture is fake, right? And I would have looked at it and thought, where'd they get that? I mean, so very different, right?
It's an understanding. It's because I was in the entertainment. I was a writer. And when reality TV came on, I hated it like a lot of writers. I hated it because it was boring. But my kids were going, this is great, Dad, you should watch it. And I told them, it's not real. And we've been groomed to believe, and I hate that word too, but we have, to believe things. And part of it is reality TV, and this is an example, is I sat my kids down and I said, wait, stop it right there. And they said, yeah, this is reality. And I said, no. And we stopped it, and I said, that scene, do you see a shadow? And that's where the understanding of what you're looking at is, and I said, there's no shadows. Go into any room where there's lights on and it's nighttime and tell me someone's standing there and there's no shadow behind them. It's because they took 30 minutes with lighting scrims to make sure they could shoot that, and they had doubles walking through it. Meanwhile, the actors, they said, we're ready, on set, cut it, go. Reality TV shows are shot that way and sold as reality. And the same thing is happening with so much information, like you said, pictures. Just simple, innocent pictures. We can't allow being to be because we need conformity. And it's been going on. If you read the House of Lords arguments in the 1820s about the labor and the poor laws, the excuses that were being made to keep children working 16 and 18 hours a day without breaks are the same arguments being made today to make large corporations money. They have not changed the arguments. The arguments repeat. They were made in the 20s. I mean, and not just those. I'm using that because I happen to have read them and I'm familiar with it. And everything changes and it all stays the same. It's the way they deflect you from looking at something that's obvious. So that, you look at a ball and say it's a ball. And they say, no, look, and you get distracted from, okay.
We should be like the reporters. Reporters fascinate me because on CNN, there are people actually endangering their lives to give a report of people getting killed in the war zone, etc. Maybe we should be like reporters, dig deeper. Maybe you could talk to us about your job.
Dig deeper, indeed. All right, so other questions, because we touched on so much here today. I'd like to go back to the legal profession for a moment, and let's discuss billing in the age of AI and what law practice looks like. Clearly, it's unethical to bill for AI's time as though they were a first associate doing it, right? We can't do that, and we're all pretty clear about that, right? if it takes AI 3 minutes to do work an associate would do in 2 to 3 hours, as more clients press lawyers to use AI for their basic work, what happens to the billable hour? And how do we train first and second and third year associates? What happens? Should lawyers bill by the project? Should they bill by the job? How do they know what to bill? And I asked the panel, what do you think? Should we be billing by the project? Let's start with Carlos, since we started the other side last time.
Yes, so as the technology evolves and it's more prevalent in the practice of law, obviously our billing methods have to evolve with it. Right now, obviously we cannot bill for the time saved by AI, so that comes to question like, what is the use of like a first year associate? So it might be on the school itself to teach more lawyer laws instead of, or lawyer skills instead of just passing the bar, which might mean we move from a method of internships to maybe something more akin to clinicals, like in the medical field, where your lawyer skills are tested per semester, just to make sure that when you do hit the workforce, you're ready to use AI and implement it into your workflow so that you can hit the ground running. And yes, you're a first year, you still have a lot of knowledge and experience to gain, but at least you're not relegated to errand boy.
So is that a residency model, and who wants to pay for the extra 4 years? Or 3 years if it's law? How does that work?
Can it be done simultaneously?
Yes, I was thinking more clinicals than
I think
residency.
medical residents,
They get paid.
my
Yeah.
wife's son just finished, he just became a doctor. And it's like 8 years, 4 years medical, and then resident, but he was paid. During his
Yeah, that's his
residency,
job.
he made,
And who paid it?
Hospital.
I guess the hospitals,
Yeah.
it was in Albuquerque,
So
so I don't know.
Is that the law firms that pay them?
I guess.
So,
If you were doing a legal,
So what's sitting before the Supreme Court of California right now is an alternative pathway to licensure called the Portfolio Bar Exam, which does include a paid internship post-graduation. They have to be paid at a wage that is living and that is not equal to but close to that of a first-year associate with a license. So that model, that idea is being initiated in Oregon, in Washington, and a couple of other, articling in Canada, they're also paid for that. So it's out there already, it just needs to be implemented.
And there are states that allow you to read for the bar.
Including California.
You work
Well,
for the
and
bar.
didn't we outlaw slave labor? I mean, I'm not being facetious, really.
No.
When I was interning, you couldn't get paid for it. And didn't something happen since 2013 saying, oh, no, you can't have slave labor. If they're working for you, they have to be making some kind of an income. There was some legislation, I didn't follow it, see it pass, but that's along the same lines. If they're going to work for you, if they're going to put out for you, then you should be putting out for them. So I don't see the problem there.
But if you don't know anything and somebody has to train you.
But that's true in any job you go into.
Yeah.
Absolutely any job you go into.
But let me just say this, I'm sorry, this is like a passion project of mine. If we could focus legal education on preparing someone to enter the law profession instead of preparing them to take a 3-hour, 2-day standardized exam that has multiple choice questions and timed written things, it would be a very different legal education experience. So if we create something like a residency post-graduation, then we're going to have a curriculum that has them enter the profession with more skills and knowledge necessary to be successful in the profession than we do now.
And if anyone practiced law like that exam, by the way, it would be malpractice.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so coming from a different perspective, I'm a nurse. So nursing school was kind of different to residency with med school. So instead of having your education for 4 years and then residency for 4 years after that, nursing hybrids it. So you have your education that you're learning in your semester, but then at the same time, you're going out and you're hands-on doing your
Practice.
experience, you're practicing. Like Dean was saying, that's actually a pretty good comment because you can have a lawyer that's book smart, but if you don't know how to practice, you don't know how to practice. You have to merge the two together. Carlos and I were talking about this yesterday. He was giving me really great ideas, but it's finding a way to balance out. You have to merge with technology and see where it's taking you, but you have to work with it. So it's not trying to create some new system, it's trying to adapt with it. So I think
Well, it goes
having
back to hands-on learning,
Yeah,
right?
I
And
could
there are
see that.
institutions in these states that say, learn by doing. That's their motto. And if we're not doing, we're not learning.
Well, you just said it perfect. I don't know of many attorneys except those who started school here where I went, because I had some other fellow students who were paralegals and said, I'm tired of being a lawyer and getting paid a paralegal. But if you're not a paralegal like I wasn't, you pass the bar and the next day you go, okay, I got sworn in and I got a license, and you're scared to death because you know nothing about what goes on in that room. And the first 4 or 5 times you walk in, you sweat through your clothes because you're terrified of what goes on. You learn, and that's why the Google clients, the Google Law graduated clients come in and they tell you all about how they're going to win their case because of X, Y, and Z, and A, B, and C, and you're going, none of that applies. It doesn't work. You need the practical experience, and like you said, well, as outside during the break, I told him, I said, go to, on your break time, go to the court and spend half a day, just sit in and, 3rd floor is family law. Go to pick a floor, pick a room, look at the docket, go in and sit.
You learn a lot by doing observation.
You'll see all kinds of stuff, and it'll make you, you'll learn the reality.
You don't know what you don't know, so you need to be exposed to it.
And with the model of legal education that we're kind of talking about, it, and with the efficiencies that AI could bring to the practice of law, along that same idea of improving access to underserved communities, I feel like that opens the door to that. I've met a few, very few. One of them was a professor we had here, attorney, who she said she went into solo practice immediately and she learned, 10 years in 1 year because she was on her own. And that the model of going to work at a firm, starting as a first year, doing the drudgery work, maybe that model is dead. And in terms of all these goals of making a more vibrant law school education rather than testing to the bar, testing to the practice, using AI to
You
have
just totally killed my follow-up question.
to have more, more attorneys that are boots on the ground right there with clients. And then even a benefit of, let's say we've got AI going in the legal profession, this also speaks to how we bill and figuring out, and still how to earn a good living and all of those things we want to do. It reduces that amount of time that you're doing that type of work, and it increases the amount of time you can interface with your client and do the other research, the fact finding, going out, and so maybe it won't be the huge impact. I mean, certain cases it will, of course, but other things it might just free you up to really have the better client advocacy than, and is that making sense? Am I saying it
I
clearly?
think
Yes,
we
makes
call
sense.
lawyers counselors, don't we?
Yeah. So instead of going, okay, like telling a client going, well, I'm going to bill you by the hour, this might cost 10 grand, and the client going, oh my God, you go, guess what? Maybe it's going to be 6 because I don't have to and we'll have way more time to do that personable counseling and get the person comfortable with what's happening and better opinion of attorneys.
In family law, most of the time people are very upset. First I have to listen to them and let them cry.
Yeah.
calm them down, then we talk about the law.
So I think this jumped off after Carlos spoke. So does anybody else have anything they would like to add to this point in conversation?
Regarding billing? Billing. So there is, the flat fee, project-based is out there, it's being used. There's, I think it was maybe 10 years ago now, a Utah firm just out of law school created a model where it was flat fee based on projects. And it was partly to create an access to justice bridge between, for example, a family lawyer that charges per hour for some of those simpler, easier to do types of things. And it was successful. So it's not as if that is new or different. It is being implemented. I think if we have a huge access to justice problem in the state of California, as we do in the United States of America, we're not going to solve that with billable hours.
No, and if billable hour goes away and flat fee comes into play, it changes the economic model on which legal services are.
We
It's
should do
going to
more
amp
pro
up
bono also.
insurance. Defense
You know,
is going to.
I use all three kinds. Sometimes I do a flat fee, sometimes I do a contingent fee, sometimes do an hourly rate. Depends upon the client, the job, what you need to do. If you hire, I had my roof fixed. When you hire someone, they come out $4,400 to fix the roof, not by the hour. In fact, 2 guys came out, they did it in half a day. So how much is it worth for you to get this job done? You know it's gonna be done, right? Yes, I'll pay you the money to get it done. To me, that works sometimes. Sometimes you want a contingent fee. Maybe it's a $500,000, $1 million case. You want that contingent, you want that 30 or 40%. You don't wanna get paid by the hour. And another time, you may be doing a small job for somebody that's only really worth $500. But if you do the hours, it'll be like 15. I said, no, that's not right. I'll do it for you for $500. I might end up spending more time, but I'll get it done for $500. The client's happy. So it depends upon the client and what you need to do, and you've got to be flexible. You know, I've got all kinds of clients. Some have got very little money, some have got a lot of money, sometimes got a lousy case. I used to work for the government. There's fixed contracts and there was cost plus contracts. I worked in aerospace. There were a lot of cost plus contracts. And the contractor would milk that. They'd make a huge mistake and huge overruns, cost plus. Government pays for it. So you've got to be flexible in billing.
Great advice.
I have a comment. Sometimes you have to do pro bono, at least in family law. People come to you, they're crying because somebody took the child away, they're dying to see the child. You can't just say, oh, you don't have money. They said, I talked to a lot of other lawyers, they want money. So sometimes you have to help them.
I got a call, I didn't know really that much about family law, and I was working at a firm that, anyway. And this lady says, can you do my divorce? And I said, well, yeah, what? She said, it's not a problem. My husband's in the pen. He wants to get divorced. I want to get divorced. We own no property and we have no children. Well, I'm thinking, dude, that's five forms and done. And I said, okay, the filing fee is this. I'm gonna have to charge you $2,000. And she said, I think it was 2,000. Anyway, she comes back to me and she says, okay, I'm a teacher. That's 20 hours work for me. And I was horrified. I thought, I'm gonna fill out some forms. And that's when I told her, I said, okay, sit down. You're gonna go to the self-help desk. You're gonna get a piece of paper. And I walked her through it. You know, I said, I am not taking your money. first of all, I have the greatest admiration for teachers. So you do that, but you need to be in practical, the first year law student doesn't, the first 5 minutes after, and by the way, this school is really good. I went here and what's the last class you take? It's law, you get to practice.
Appellate.
You play law.
Oh, I don't know that we're doing that one in the last class anymore. It's offered as an elective. Law practice management is what's called
Yeah,
now.
law practice.
Oh, I
Yeah.
took that last year.
And so it was very good. Mr. Dietz taught it and made fun of me throughout. But anyway, you need that, but it's like this gentleman says, with some experience as far as billing go, I don't bill depending, but most of the time I don't bill for phone calls. Unless I'm babysitting. And you do have to do some babysitting all the time.
In family law, they call you
But-
every 5 minutes.
But I'll tell them, and if it's in civil rather than family, where you do a lot of babysitting, I'll tell them if I recognize this is the third call in 3 days saying the same thing, I'm gonna hang up now and you need to go find a psychologist or a babysitter because they charge a lot cheaper than I do. But you do it, like you said, contingency,
No contingency.
but
in
it's
family law.
interesting about the billing, if you're using AI, that's gonna change things. That's really, how do you?
Before AI, if you're using Westlaw, okay, you're using, back in the day, Westlaw was incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
By the minute, it was outrageous.
Yeah.
Do you bill the client for that? Do you bill the client or your hourly rate plus a part of the, So I think that the Westlaw, the AI thing, that's part of your overhead. That's part, paying the rent, paying for the router guides, which I still do sometimes. That's all part of your overhead. And then your billing rate should be for your time that you're using the tools. But are you gonna charge the client for the tools? I don't know. And the other one is phone calls, good
Well,
point.
how do you feel you don't charge for phone calls either?
I do, well, I used to never, but the clients, sometimes they abuse it.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, you
Sometimes
have
they're
to,
like,
you have to
they used to be
recognize
calling
when
me,
that's happening.
and my wife would say, never call a client after business hours. And so that's wrong, because I don't wanna do business
Then we
hours.
text you a
My
question.
wife,
She said, "You're
control
I'd
we
rather
have.
talk
It's
to
okay.
clients
But they
after
text
business
you.
hours."
but,
It's nice to
but
hear
do
from
They
you,
send you a text then.
what do you do, but I'm thinking AI is writing, well, I guess we do that with, I don't do that, but there's programs that, where you just type in a few of the things and it runs off the forms. And if AI is writing the report, well, if they're not gonna write my briefs or my motions, but then nobody else.
How many of you have submitted forms into, or documents into Ventura Superior Court?
How do you feel about what?
How many of you have submitted briefs or other motions? And so, how many of you are familiar with Trellis Law? Trellis Law is a new entrepreneurial organization that is going through every state in the country. And even though there's public records and all the state documents are public records, they're now scanning every single public document, creating a database that you can go in and say, basically, I've got a summary judgment motion before Judge X in this kind of case.
I want one he approved.
What has won in
Yeah.
summary judgment motions before this judge?
Wow.
And it can help you identify and even look at the briefs and other things that judge found significant. So that you're all content creators right now for Trellis Law. Anyone who has submitted documents into a state court is a content creator, and then they're charging you for access to Trellis Law so that you can go in and access all of that data. So AI is going to change the way lawyers approach problem solving.
but you still have to write, you
Based
still have
on
to
the
write it
facts.
with your voice.
You still have to write with your voice, sure, but it's
And-
very different starting from
I mean,
scratch
because I
with your
can't
voice.
imagine letting something, putting a few facts in and letting it write my demur. And by the
Absolutely
way,
not.
Can I ask a question real quick? I think it was you, you said, who was it? AI did a motion to dismiss in February? Okay, was it and this is a stupid question, but I'm just curious, was it a demur, an anti-slap, or a motion to dismiss?
It said in the articles I read, motion to dismiss.
Okay.
It was federal court, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a federal court,
So it's 5 till 2.
so, all right, next question. Since we talked billing and a lot of other things here, I'm skipping the next question, which was about how does legal education evolve because of AI? Unless someone wants to discuss whether or not we should be training law students to use AI in the
Yes,
classroom.
we should. That's just yes. Yes.
I think everyone's gonna say yes.
We won't even ask
Might
that
as well teach
question.
them to use it.
If we use AI in the classroom right now, it's plagiarism. So.
Well, no, what it says is that unless your professor has provided you permission to, like, wants you to use AI as part of the assignment, then it's fine.
So let's talk a little bit about AI and democracy. We got 5 minutes left. This is a topic that won't stop here.
We can do that in 5.
So
It's not that important.
do you think transparency and accountability integrated into AI systems would overcome the First Amendment issues?
Can you repeat that, please?
Would transparency and accountability integrated into the AI system? So if we integrated transparency and it was clear where everything came from. So this is an ad by X politician and I approve this message or whatever the AI equivalent is, right? Would that kind of transparency and accountability, if it was integrated into the AI systems, would that overcome the risks and sort of offset some of the First Amendment issues? I'll go to the panel for this. I'll start with Stephanie.
I'm not sure I know First Amendment issues enough to be able to. I haven't taken Dean Gardina's class
You
yet,
can phone a friend.
so I'm gonna phone a friend.
You have to pick the friend you're phoning.
Oh no, shh, Kimberly.
No, I'm thinking about, the question is, will it overcome First Amendment challenges? Is that
Is it
the
gonna-
question you're asking?
Yeah, and is it gonna offset the problem, right?
Freedom of speech.
Are we?
Well, I mean, in the context of elections, if it's an ad or if we already have,
We don't have transparency as far as AI is concerned, right?
but like just, I mean, the example you gave where it says this is paid for, produced by blah, 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 when it's
Right.
a specific campaign thing,
So
But-
if it's a picture of Biden in a diaper
yeah.
and it says paid for by the Republicans or whatever it's going to say, right? I mean, does transparency help?
I mean, I would say people
foster
wouldn't even
accountability?
trust that. People would see that on a meme on X or Facebook, and they would think that was added by somebody. They don't believe that.
1948.
So there is no accountability and
No,
transparency.
it's not gonna
Well,
work to
I-
label it because in 1948, Richard Nixon and Bob Haldeman pled nolo contendory to mail fraud when they were mailing out things saying we're Helen Gahagan Douglas and I believe in communism. I mean, it wasn't quite that obvious, but it was being done back there. You just fraudulently label it and people are gonna then, it's like double blind. I don't see how labeling will stop the fake news. Will people care? What they'll become used, what they'll do is become used to, oh, it's by AI. But it makes sense to me.
I think that we won't overcome it with transparency because I think it's going to be difficult. The scale, scope, sophistication, and speed of AI, very different than putting a stamp on an envelope and sending it out. You're going to reach millions of people. So even if we're holding someone accountable, it's going to be after the fact, and the damage is going to be done. And we know already, and we've seen it in today's world, justice moves slowly. And so the accountability could come 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 years later.
And by then it's old news.
Two presidential
So a
terms.
follow-up question to that, and the one we'll end on, is how do we fix this mess?
Lots of great.
How does the law fix the mess?
Oh, Kat.
Yeah.
I just have, kind of dovetailing into the prior question too. I mean, the first, from the First Amendment side, the First Amendment essentially allows you to lie.
It does.
So requiring transparency really, in a sense, abridges First Amendment because now you have to disclose that you're lying. And is there a rule to disclose?
Yeah.
Outside of specific areas where you must be truthful. But the second part of that is, how do we address that? I don't think you're gonna address it through the technology side because technology moves faster than we can educate ourselves to understand the technology. What we need to do is to, I believe, is to educate our youth and ourselves to be more critically thinking and to understand the concept of what a fake is and to trust, their own gut about what's real and what's not, but the critical thinking teaching, I think, is the foundational thing that we need.
It's information
To
literacy.
be able to make those distinctions between what's real and what's not.
And that's why we should be paying close attention to what kind of legislation is going around for K through 12 education. All of this is connected.
Yep.
So what is being allowed to be taught, what is not being allowed to be taught, and what does that mean for the future of our democracy? It's not just about information literacy, it's about basic civic education as well. So all of it's connected, the K through 12 education legislation.
I have to say, the First Amendment does not give you permission to lie.
Yes.
Yeah,
It does not do that. What it
freedom
says
of
is you can
speech.
say anything you want, but you may be held in civil court or and accountable for what
That
you
is-
say if someone
Absolutely.
detrimentally relies upon it.
And the latter part of the comma and thereafter, it doesn't absolve you of consequence. You can still lie,
So,
but there will be consequences.
Right, it's protected. Lies are protected under the First Amendment, and then you have to apply the First Amendment test. So is it content-based? And if so, is it, so strict scrutiny applies. If it's not so yes, fraud, we've made a determination that fraud's not. Defamation is another thing. So there's lots of times where there's consequences for lies, but you start first with the premise that lies are protected speech under the First Amendment. And then you move to the analysis that you would do. So it's not a free-for-all in terms of
You can't yell fire in a theater.
so you can yell fire in a theater if there's a fire.
But if there's no fire,
No, I mean, that's that idea of you can't yell fire
and light it.
fire in a crowded theater, you
if there's
can.
no fire, you can't yell fire in a theater.
You can, there'll be consequences though, if you cause a panic and
And
there's,
that's where the
And
word
people are injured,
accountability
but-
comes in
Someone,
heavily.
right? I mean, there's-
yeah.
You had a point you were gonna make.
I just wanted to say that, how do you define truth and opinion? Because it varies. And my truth can be your opinion, and when you try to distinguish that outside of consequences for saying something that would have those kinds of consequences, how do you do that when in our vernacular today, we have alternative facts?
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with that?
So I think it's a really great point. When it comes to the First Amendment, the question is, who do you want determining that? Do we want the government to say, that's a fact, that's an opinion, and you're going to be penalized for doing one over the other? So when it comes to First Amendment, and this is the absolution, they're like, I'm willing to take a lot of lies flooding the marketplace because the idea of the government deciding what's true and what's false is far scarier than the idea of disinformation being out there and me being allowed to make a determination on my own, which goes back to the critical thinking thing that we were talking about before. So it is a really scary piece.
And just piggybacking off of the idea of both K through 12 curriculum, information literacy. I have to speak up for the Fourth Estate, the media, and the decline of independent news reporting across the country, and it's impacting every little community, big communities, the entire country, obviously. There's this phenomenon that I've been learning about recently. The publisher of our paper and I were up in Sacramento 2 weeks ago supporting a bill similar to bills that have passed in Canada, which are trying to hold the big social media platforms who are harvesting our public information and selling it to advertisers. And those advertisers are no longer advertising in news publications, which was the bread and butter that would support all your local papers, right? Mm-hmm. So those big platforms now are taking your information, they're selling it to the advertisers and other entities that are using it.
They're stealing.
And then they're also manipulating how you see news online when you're searching for news. And so all the little local newspapers are dying. So there are legislators who are trying to pass laws that are gonna tax those big companies, and there's really just three, Meta, Amazon, and Google, and saying you guys are making over $2.5 billion, so there's a percentage of that you're gonna put in a fund, and then we're gonna divvy that out to local newspapers. And so that's my pitch for that, to support that legislation.
And there's a case before the Supreme Court that we'll be covering in classes, where the government did go to social media companies and say, hey, we're worried about the misinformation around COVID, or we're worried about misinformation about this. Can you take those things down? And the question becomes, were they be coercing Google? And so it was a government mandate to take down information, or was it jawboning? Was it simply the government doing what I would call take that review of my restaurant down? So that's going to be decided by the Supreme Court, and it's going to be a question of, when does government cross the line when they say that's misinformation or disinformation, we're worried about public health, public safety, whatever, take it down.
It's like an ex parte
Public
movement.
health.
It's like an ex parte motion. The government needs to act fast, but it needs to show imminent danger. I think that's what that's about.
Yeah.
Can I just say, it's a very good question about the difference between opinion and truth. Opinion is a conclusion. It's a conclusion. Truth is, this appears to be metal. I think we can test it and verify it. We test it. It's metal. Truth is testable.
But who would have the tools to be able to test to see if it's plastic or metal? Like, the general population wouldn't have the tools to do that. So we're assigning the ability to verify to people who may not have the ability to do that. So
that's why Jefferson said you need an educated populace to have a democracy.
Well, I think it also speaks to the death of expertise and the do your own research crowd. So we no longer trust scientists or others. So if someone had a report that said that was made of X kind of metal, there'd be those who said, I don't trust that source. I found this other source that said it's not metal. I'm going to trust that one. And so
in court, you have both. You have the defense and the prosecution. They're all going to have their witnesses attesting to the same information, and who do you believe?
Only experts can testify as to their opinion.
Yeah.
True.
And what's an expert?
Guy will take my money, that's it.
So thank you all for coming today. I'm really pleased that we had these great conversations. Thank you very much to the students who worked so incredibly hard and did such a wonderful job.